Hey guys, Argent here with one of the last arguments on our list, the ontological argument. This is near the end, and this doesn't really seem to be any particular order because I didn't really know where to put it. This is the argument I'm the worst with and that I find the strangest. I just include it because it's a classical one, and some people seem to really like it. It's definitely the most abstract, though. So, this is the formulation. Point 1. It is possible that a maximally great being, in this case God, exists, because God with an uppercase G is by nature a maximally great being. If it is possible that a maximally great being exists, then a maximally great being exists in some possible world. So this is kind of it's not exactly the multiverse. By possible world, they don't mean like another world that's created. They mean if things were different. Like if you didn't ask a particular girl to the ball, like to your prom, and then you're like, I wonder what would have happened if I had of. That would be like a different possible world. So it's not anything really that strange. That's kind of a very basic form of it. There could be like a possible world where people are just spirits and don't have bodies. Like any kind of fiction, any work of fiction is a possible world. So the question is it if there is a possibility that a divine being exists in one possible exists period, then theoretically it should exist in a possible world. I think that's pretty straightforward, if a little confusing. If a maximally great being exists in some possible world, then it exists in every possible world. Why is that? Because I believe part of being maximally great is existing in all worlds. So if a being holds the ultimate form of existence, then by nature, the ultimately great being, as part of its nature, would exist in all worlds, because it's a core part of its essence. So, if part of its nature is to exist in all possible worlds, if it can exist in a possible world, then by definition it exists in all possible worlds. If a maximally great being exists in every possible world, then it exists in the actual world. If it can exist in a possible world, all possible worlds, this is a possible world because it's happening. So God exists in this world as well as the possible worlds. Therefore, a maximally great being exists in the actual world. Just brief follow-up. Therefore, a maximally great being exists. Therefore, God exists, and that's Plantinga. All right. So this argument was first formulated by Anselm of Canterbury, and it was also advanced by René Descartes and Leibniz. If this looks at all similar, this is kind of what Descartes based I think Therefore I Am on. This and what God says in the Bible, where he just says, I am. I was not originally going to include it as I find it confusing, esoteric, and an intellectual sleight of hand. Most recently it was revived by Alvin Plantinga, if that's how you pronounce his name, and that was the formulation I just showed. So this is kind of William Craig's shortened, simplified version. So we'll just go over this again. It is possible that an all-surpassing great being exists, a being greater than which nothing can be conceived. Sorry, phone. It's possible that an all-surpassingly great being exists, i.e., a being greater than which nothing can be conceived. In other words, an all-surpassingly great being exists in some possible world. In other words, can you conceive of a world where God exists? If you've been through the other arguments, I think it's pretty obvious that you can conceive of that. If an almighty being exists in some possible world, then it exists in every possible world, because existence is a part of being in the all-surpassingly greatness would include existing in every world. If an all-surpassingly great being exists in every possible world, then it exists in the actual world, since the actual world is clearly a possible world. If an all-surpassingly great being exists in the actual world, then an all-surpassingly great being actually exists. William Lane Craig. So let's go into this a bit. So essentially saying, If it's possible for God to exist, then he exists in one possible world. Since God is by definition infinite, part of being infinite is to exist in all possible worlds. Also, he's outside of space and time, so world God doesn't exactly exist in the world. He exists within the world, but he also exists beyond it. Kind of like panentheism, because he precedes the existence of the world and precedes the existence of the universe. Thus, because God can be conceived and he exists in one possible world, he exists in all possible worlds. Part of the argument is that God is something like numbers, which exist in all possible worlds. I cannot conceive of a world where 1 plus 1 does not equal 2. I didn't write that properly. I think numbers are universal. I think they're the same in all possible worlds. You can put whatever name you want on them. At the end of the day, if you have two apples, regardless of what color they are, regardless of what the stars look like, there's just two of them. It's just a concept that can't change. Much like how Descartes could not conceive of a world where I think therefore I am is not true. Um, I think that's pretty straightforward. If you are capable of thinking, you exist. It doesn't matter what else is part of the world. Even if it's an illusion, then there has to be something. Even if it's an illusion is still something. It's not the thing you think it is, but it's still light and particles. Other examples would be concepts like properties, propositions, or any abstract notion um, that's like that. It doesn't really matter how the world exists, things are still going to have properties. Like I said, I sort of understand it. It doesn't feel right to me. It feels too esoteric. Um, I don't see how it really. I don't know. It just doesn't feel right to me. It kind of feels like wordplay. Um, but hopefully that was okay, and hopefully that made a bit of sense. Yeah, I don't know. Some people really like that argument. Some people think it's airtight. I can't see an obvious logical issue with it. It just seems like something like when did you stop beating your wife? Like a linguistical trick. I don't know. I'll have to think about it a bit, but I just included it because I needed to include it. This is Argent Templar signing out.